Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In this lecture we will study whether test scores can be used to determine which of two players is the better batter. We will see that this apparently simple question has a very complex answer which is linked to causal considerations, and that these issues are not there in the data, and so answering the question requires a much deeper understanding of the real world issues and cannot be done from data alone. So we will start with another example of Simpson's paradox based on some artificial data. We are going to use names of real players, but these are just for the sake of spice and interest. So we have Sangakkara and Miyanda, they're two batters. S scored an average of 60 runs per match over his career, and M scored an average of 50 runs per match. So based on these two numbers, we can say that S is the better batter of the two. As we have already discussed in previous lectures, the numbers are not capable of proving anything at all. We must have specific and detailed information about the real world structures which generate the data, and we will generate some situations where M is a better batter but he has a lower average score, just to prove this thesis. So in cricket there are two types of bowlers. Pace bowlers rely on speed and spin bowlers rely on rotating the ball in certain ways to deceive the batter. So we consider these scores and we assume that M does well against pace bowlers and he averages 80 runs in matches where he is put up against pace bowlers. But he does poorly against spin bowlers and his average is only 30. Sangakkara also does well against pace, but his average is 70 instead of 80, is worse than Miyadad against pace. And S also does poorly against spin bowlers and his average is only 20. So against either type of bowler, Sangakkara is worse than Miyadad. But now, depending on who faced which type of bowler, the averages can vary. So for example, if Miyadad mostly faced a field in which there were spin bowlers, then his performance would be closer to his bottom average of 30. And if Sangakkara placed mostly against pace bowlers, where he has a better average, then his average will be higher. So the higher score of Sangakkara does not reflect his higher skill. It only reflects the fact that he faced a field in which there were bowlers who were more adapted to his style of batting, whereas Miyadad had the opposite, and he was faced with bowlers that he was not effective against. So there is a bias in the field which leads to a lower score for Miyadad, even though he is the better batter of the two. So when we come to the question of who is the better batter, the answer depends on why we are asking this question. The goals matter importantly. For example, suppose our goal is that we want one of them to teach the other how to bat. So in this case, based on this data, Miyadad is better than Sangakkara against both pace and spin bowlers. So Miyadad should teach Sangakkara how to bat against pace and against S. But second purpose is that given a fixed set of bowlers which is determined in advance, so in this match you know that 5 of the overs will be dealt with by pace bowlers and the other 5 by spin bowlers. As long as this is exogenous, that it is chosen independently of the batter, Miyadad would be the better of the two because he is better against both types. But this is not invariant, as we will see. If the choice of bowler depends on the batter, then the answer may change. For example, suppose that the opposing coach is aware of the weakness of Miyadad against spin bowlers, but is not aware of the same weakness of Sangakkara. So in that case, if Miyadad comes to bat, the opposing coach will send out spin bowlers and lead to a very low score for Miyadad, but he will not do the same, so Sangakkara will end up scoring better. And again, suppose that the opposing coach is aware of the weakness of Sangakkara but not of Miyadad, then Miadad will turn out to get a better score. So the details of who is better depends very, very strongly on aspects of the world, aspects of the real world which are simply not there in the data at all. In the initial configuration, we had Miadad being better than Sangakkara against both types of batters, but there are other configurations of scores, for example, and skills. So, for example, suppose Miadad is good against space and Sangakkara is bad against space, and the reverse is true for spin. Sangakkara is good against spin but bad against space. So, depending on the field, the percentage of spin and pace bowlers in a given match, either one can have better overall average score, and the higher overall average score does not tell us anything at all about the skills of the two batters. To reiterate, suppose we want to answer the question who is the better batter, first we must know why we want to answer this question. So for example, in this example, suppose we are asking who can teach the other, who is the skill. So in this case, Miadad should teach Sangakkara for pace bowlers, but Sangakkara teach Miadad for spin bowlers. So each of them have different types of skills, and both of them have something to learn from each other. So we can't say who is better. Against a fixed field of pace and spin bowlers, Miadad will be better if pace bowlers are dominant, and Sangakkara will be better if spin types are dominant. And then again, if the field is endogenous, if the opposing coach is aware of the characteristics of Miadad and Sangakkara, then he will choose the worst type, and so the scores will again vary according to the knowledge of the opposing coach. So when it comes to purpose of comparison, the details who is better depends very, very strongly on very specific details of the particular situation that we are in. Now, abstracting from the specific example, we come to the general theoretical framework, and that is depicted in this diagram. What we have been talking about here is called a moderating variable. We have player abilities which affect match scores, but the bowler types and other structural variables like the pitch and the weather conditions, etc., they affect how abilities are transformed into scores. So these variables, which are not actually directly part of the causal sequence, these are called moderating variables because they influence the relationship between the causal variable and the effect variable. The causal variable here is the abilities or the skills of the player, and the effect is the scores of the match, and the relationship between the two is moderated by bowler types and by pitch and by other field variables which affect the strength of this relationship. Very different from the moderator is the mediating variable, which we discussed in the last lecture. Here the gender of the applicant affects the choice of department, and then the department determines the admit ratio. So in this mediating picture, gender causes department and department causes admissions. Department is in the middle of the causal path, and it screens off the effect of gender on admit ratio. This is a technical term because once we know the department, we don't need to know the gender, because the departments have gender blind admission policy, and so but the choice of the department will determine the admit ratio. So the gender affects the admit ratio only through the choice of the department, and so this is called a perfect mediator. We will look at cases of imperfect mediation in the next lecture. So some concluding remarks. The question which batter is better, which appears to be a simple and clear-cut question, does not have an answer. When you want to answer the question, the only way to do so is to ask why are you asking? What is the action that you plan to take on the basis of the answer given? So given a comparison in the abstract is meaningless, but a companion can be meaningful. Who should I send out to play in the next over? Well, that depends on a lot of detailed information which is not available from the past batting scores, and very subtle and difficult to determine aspects of reality can determine which of the two choices is better. And so basically the main lesson from this is that causal pathways and causal effects are not there in the data and require investigation of real-world mechanisms. Additionally, we must note that all of this analysis is based on a very, very simple assumed underlying structure of reality, that there is only one major difference, and that's spin and pace. And this is not really true. The actual reality is much more complex, and there may be other hidden variables which we don't know about, which have an important effect on the causal chains. And we have no way of knowing about this from the numbers alone, but somebody who has spent his years studying players and cricket and scores will have a lot more knowledge about the factors which matter, and his analysis will be much deeper than any statistical analysis could achieve. Finally, at a higher level, we have a meta principle that even when you have one-dimensional score, a single number, we can't really compare objectively which is the better batter. We can't say that the bigger number belongs to the better batter. And no single number can be used to evaluate quality. It's possible to compare things only for a specific purpose, and given different purposes, different actions may come out as being superior. So there is no one uniform measure that who is better, who has more intelligence, which college is higher ranked, and many other questions, which country is more prosperous, whether we have grown more prosperous over the past century or not. All of these issues, because the answers are multidimensional, there is no single objective characteristic which can be used to provide an answer. So now the question is, why is this widely disbelieved? Why do people believe in progress? Why do people believe in college rankings? Why do people believe that some people are smarter than others? This comes from a turn taken in Western epistemology, in which they rejected God, and then they rejected all unobservables, and then they pronounced Lord Kelvin's blunder that knowledge must be quantifiable. If you can observe something, you can measure it. And so basically everything that is meaningful part of knowledge must be measured by numbers. So this led to IQ scores, SAT scores, college rankings, all of which are more or less meaningless noise. But because of the wide respect for Western epistemology, everybody believes and trusts in numbers, and people spout nonsense like numbers cannot lie, which is simply false.